In Chapter 4, Lesson 4, we're going to change it up a little bit. We've spent so much time talking about immigrants in urban America and the difficulties that those immigrants had working in those factories coming to America. We're going to change gears. We're going to focus on how in rural America, the access to jobs and pay and transportation, cultural opportunities, it's significantly less. You're not going to get those same kinds of opportunities. Really, what you're going to be limited to if you're living in rural America is going to be primarily farms. And we're going to see how Americans are going to try to change their opportunities politically in order to improve their lives in rural America on those farms. So in this first section, ultimately, what we're going to talk about is something called a high tariff. Now, we've discussed tariffs before, right? We've talked about them as taxes, things that are taxed when they come from other countries, so that Americans who make goods at home, in this case, things that are produced on a farm, that they're going to be able to charge cheaper prices than things made overseas. And we're going to talk about how those tariffs are designed to protect, particularly in rural America, farms. So let's jump to it, because what we have to understand here is that right after the Civil War, a number of things are going to happen. And in particular, what we need to understand is that after the Civil War, there's a lot of money available, but there's nothing to buy with it. And there's a couple of reasons for that, of course. Ultimately, the two big reasons why there's a ton of money available is that the government had to, essentially print money in order to pay off its war debt, right? I mean, you have to pay for a war, right? So you need money to do that. And so the government is going to print more money to pay for its debt, and it's also going to take out more loans to pay for its war. So it's not just going to print everything, it's also going to take out loans to pay for those things. But that's great that there's a lot of money kind of floating around there, but there's no industry out there to pay for any of this besides the industry that's producing, war materials. No, and you don't need to buy a cannon. The average American doesn't have to go out and buy a 10-pound Napoleon, right? So just remember, here is our timeline to kind of make you understand this, right? The Civil War itself is going to be taking place from 1861 to 1865. That's when our government is printing all this money to pay for its debt. That's when the government's taking out all these loans. And that's when all the industry is busy making war materials. So we're not making anything else at the time. So you're going to have a ton of money available, and you're not going to have anything to buy with it. Note when the Gilded Age and the Second Industrial Revolution begin, 1870. So all of a sudden, you've got this 5-year period here, at least 5-year period, where there's going to be a lot of money, but not a lot of things to buy with it. So we're going to take a look here over time as to what this does for Americans and how Americans are trying to deal with this. In particular, here's what happens when you have a lot of money in circulation, but nothing to buy with it. It's called inflation. So let's take a look at what inflation looks like. Inflation is when there is a decline in the value of money. Money is worth less. The definition is right here. To help you understand what that looks like, I chose this little chart right here. $20 at the top of each little part of this image, right? $20 here, here, and here. In 1972, $20 could buy you all of this food. Your money is worth quite a lot. However, there was more money available in the economy for different reasons in 1992. That same $20 only buys you this much. There's been a decline in your value. It's worth less because you can buy less with it. 2012, inflation occurs. The same $20 is there. You can buy even less still with that $20. So what you have is a decline in the value of the same $20 over time. This is going to be especially visible in a variety of different things, and I called some other images up here to help you see inflation, right? So here's the cost of eggs in 1982. 95 cents for a dozen eggs. In 2012, it's $1.77. It's an 86% increase. Your money is worth less. This is what's going to happen, okay? Because when you have inflation, if money is worth less, you have to give people more of it to buy things. That $20 buys less over time. I'm not going to take $20 if it's worth less. You're going to have to give me more to buy the same amount of stuff. If you want to buy the same amount of stuff in 1992 as you did in 1972, you're going to need $30. You want to buy the same amount of stuff in 1972 as you did in 2012, you're going to need even more than that. You're going to be like 50, $60, right? So you have to give people more money to buy the same amount of things because it's worth less. So when you look at the price of eggs, I have to give you more money in 2012 than I did in 1982 because it's worth less. Same could be said for gas. 1982, gas was $1.28. 2012, it's $3.87. I got to give you more money for the same gallon of gas because it's worth less. You can see that for bread, orange juice, each of them costing more. I have to give you more of it because it's worth less. Okay? That's a really important concept to understand. That when the value of money falls, it's worth less, so you have to give people more of it. You can even see it in movie tickets, right? Cost of movie tickets over time as the dollar is worth less, right? From 7 cents in 1910 up to $8 for an average movie ticket price in 2013. It's worth less. So we have to give you more of it to get the same thing. That's really bad for farmers because they're not able to get the things that they need because there's tons of money out there. That's terrible, right? It's worth less. That's going to hurt farmers because they're not going to be able to get their money. So what you're going to do here is you're going to try and help farmers by getting people to buy American. Tariffs is the concept behind that. And I know we've discussed tariffs before. You can see an example here, right, where food coming in from Europe costs $1. Our government puts a tariff or tax of 25 cents on it. So when it comes to America, the same food is worth $1.25. Farmers can charge $1.24 made in America. People are going to buy the American-made good, not the European-made good because it's too expensive. So farmers here are going to be looking at finding a way to help themselves. They're going to try and survive inflation by making sure that people are buying American. That tariff makes the food coming in from Europe even more expensive, so even with inflation, people will buy American-made products. That's the idea anyway. This is obviously a problem, and the government's going to try and fix inflation. One of the ways it's going to try and do that to fix inflation, it's going to do a couple of different things, and you can see them up here in this slide. It's going to stop printing money, going to pay off its debts. This is great when you see this happen, right? So here on the left, you've got the original amount of money that we have available. The government's going to stop printing money, so we're going to see a decline in how much money is available. It's going to pay off its debts, so even less money will be out in that economy. That's great. That's great. The amount of money's there. This is going to be awesome. This is going to lead to a decline in inflation. So that if you're looking at this little chart here, which shows us the price of goods rising over time as the value of the dollar falls, what's going to happen here is the government stops printing money and paying off debt. What's going to happen to this is that the value of the dollar will slowly, hopefully, bottom out, maybe even start to rise, right? And that over time, the price of goods will slowly level off and maybe even start to fall as the value of the dollar rises. But this is dangerous. It's dangerous. I want you to understand why that's dangerous. The problem with this is that because our government begins to enter the second industrial revolution and we're making more than ever before, now we have all these products that are out there that we actually want people to buy, right? Take a look, right? The last little line of this chart was that the value of all the goods made in the Industrial Revolution is now higher than the amount of money that we have left in our economy. So all of a sudden, people can't buy the stuff that we're making. So the government fixes it too much. the government takes too much money out of the economy. What it needed to do was balance it out and make sure that the amount of money in the economy was the same as the value of all the goods made in the Second Industrial Revolution. But we don't do that. We mess it up. So we're producing more than there's an actual enough money to buy. That's a dangerous, dangerous thing. So what's that going to be? What's that going to be called? It's going to be called deflation. That's an increase in the value of money and a decrease in prices. And I showed you that in that little chart that I made over here, right? Where you start to see as the amount of money decreases, the price of goods will fall and the value of the dollar will rise because there's less of it out there, right? Because if money is harder to get, there's less of it around, its value is going to go up. If you have that happen just as businesses and farms are producing more, you're going to get something called deflation. And that's really, really hard on farmers because they're producing more, meaning their prices are going to fall, their profit margin is going to be less, and they're going to have to pay more in rail rates than, say, a large producer of a good. I put a graph here of what deflation looks like so you can understand why it's particularly dangerous. Lower prices for goods and services, right? Deflation, right? There is less money in the economy, so you're going to see a lowering of prices and an increase in the value of the dollar. Means there's not enough money out there for people to buy all those goods, especially dangerous for farmers because they're producing more. So they make less profit. That's what that smaller cash flow means. You're going to see if you're not getting to make as much or if you're not selling as much, you're going to reduce your production. You're going to stop hiring. You're going to lay off workers because you don't need to make as much. This is going to increase unemployment if you don't need workers to make as much. And if you increase unemployment, well, then people will have even less money to spend on goods and services because they're unemployed, so that oversupply will continuing to drive down prices, continuing to raise the value of the dollar, less profit, more layoffs, more unemployment, less spending, and on and on and on and on we go, and it's going to keep going around and around and around and around. Both of these things are really bad. Inflation and deflation are both really bad, right? Because if prices are rising faster than your income, it's going to be impossible to buy goods. But in deflation, if prices are falling but you've been laid off, you have no money, so you still can't afford to buy anything, no matter how low prices drop. It's going to be a really difficult situation to be in. And you can't fix this with tariffs, right? You can't fix this by stop printing money or paying off debt, because what you need to do is find a way to get more money into the economy. This is really going to upset farmers. So what you're going to see here are farmers begin to push for change. These economic crises are really going to hurt farmers, and they're going to push for some things. They're going to want to regulate big business, railroads. They want to protect farmers and small business because they're really hurting from all this inflation at first and then deflation. So the farmers begin to organize themselves, and what they begin to do is create a new political party. They're going to join and push for a new political movement called populism. And the idea here is that we want farmers to gain strength. And there's a bunch of stuff that they want to have happen. And I can show you that here, right? Farmers want a variety of things to make their lives better, stronger. They're going to want more government help. They're going to want to increase silver to offset deflation by returning to inflation, hopefully increasing profit for farmers, hopefully allowing farmers to have a better life in the future. So that's populism. And this idea here, that they're going to continue to kind of push for a better life for farmers is going to actually lead to a new political party called the People's Party. And they're first going to have an election. They're first going to actually run for president in 1892. They're going to actually get out there and they're going to say, you know what? if you believe that farmers need to have a better life, farmers need to have a different future, vote for the People's Party. And what they're really going to push for, and one of the biggest things they're going to push for to help Americans get out of this kind of inflation and deflation, they're going to really push for something called a graduated income tax, where the more money you make, the more you'll pay in taxes. And that's going to really be important, and it's something that's going to continue to come back. So I wanted to give you this little image here to help you understand what that looks like. Yeah, you can see here, right, if you make this much money in income, you pay this much tax. If you make a little bit more in income, you make a little bit more, or you pay a little bit more in tax. You make a little bit more than that in income, you're going to pay even more in tax. It's a gradual rise in income, meaning a gradual rise in tax, a graduated income tax. That's one of the big things farmers want to help offset some of the problems of inflation and deflation. You're also going to see people say, you know what, we have to make sure factory workers are helped out, give them an 8-hour workday. We want to make sure that native factory workers are helped out by restricting immigration. They're going to nominate a guy for president in 1892 as part of the People's Party as populism grows. They're going to lose to Democrat Grover Cleveland, however. Under Cleveland, and we're going to talk about him in a future chapter, there are going to be pushes to make lives for farmers better. But populism itself, the idea of it, of helping Americans, helping farmers in particular, fight inflation and deflation, it's not going to go away. You're going to see that return with the election of 1896, where Democrat William Jennings Bryan has the support of the People's Party by regulating big business, by helping farmers, by trying to allow them to have a better way of kind of surviving and getting more profit and joining the success of workers in cities. But the Republicans are going to nominate William McKinley, and he convinces people that the prosperity of the Second Industrial Revolution, that the prosperity of the Gilded Age, the gold of the Gilded Age, depends on big business. And if you elect the populists like the Democrat William Jennings Bryan, then you're going to destroy big business, and the prosperity of the Gilded Age will come to an end. So, the message of equal rights for all, whether you're a farmer, whether you are a worker, with no special privileges for anybody, that doesn't matter to folks like William Jennings Bryan and to other Americans, because they want to keep that prosperity, meaning McKinley is going to win. We'll talk more about this in class tomorrow, but for now, that's a pretty good introduction to populism.